Hello and welcome everyone, or everything if you so prefer. Here on the E-Kyon-Kun channel, I have decided to make it my best effort to be as politically correct as possible, and address everyone or everything as his, her, or their preferred title. As some seem to believe that they are neither male nor female for some odd reason, here is my fantastic guest, a male who decides to call himself Joe. Welcome.
Hey everyone, I'm Joe, and I make videos over on a channel called PriorityPod. You've almost certainly never heard of me, and that's okay, you fucks, because now you have. I'm an asshole, and YouTube has decided that assholes like me are no longer welcome on their platform.
Well, Joe, it seems YouTube has some new policies made a little while ago. These policies will restrict the monetization of YouTube videos and create a more strict environment, so that the website is more promoted to be user-friendly and as inoffensive as possible. What are your thoughts on that?
Here's how I see it. The fact that just because my content isn't appropriate for Toys R Us to advertise on doesn't mean that all other advertisers have the same guidelines. In fact, their old guidelines for monetization put the emphasis on the advertiser to decide which video and creators they wanted to advertise with. Now they want a one-size-fits-all policy, so if you make content that isn't appropriate for a 6-year-old, you're simply not welcome to run ads on your videos anymore. I don't care if the only people stupid enough to run ads on my channel are the Church of Satan and Donald Trump himself, but to say I shouldn't be able to have ads served at all is ridiculous. People say worse things on television every day, and they manage to find advertisers willing to go with it. Why can't YouTube do the same? In fact, they've used that exact model successfully for years. And the thing is, you don't even have to be as offensive or insensitive as I am to be demonetized under these new Orwellian rules. So we're going to go over these one by one to show you just how poorly worded and downright terrifying these new rules are.
Now, before we start, we should take a look at what they wrote before the policies are even stated. And in fact, we have to begin with the subsection title, Content that is considered inappropriate for advertising, which lists what YouTube has deemed to be in the disinterest of any advertiser that may want to associate themselves with the video in question. This clearly can only lead to wonderful things, as any time a single entity is given complete control over what is considered offensive or not, the end result usually ends up in the public favor. Enacting a one-size-fits-all approach to handle what they wish to be the new, completely innocuous website, where no one shall profit off of any content displeasing to anyone.
Yep, again, they're trying to get rid of any content that could be problematic to any advertisers at all. And instead of saying the advertisers need to do their own research and find out who they want to run ads on and who they don't, they decided to just censor massive swaths of the important and relevant creators on this network.
Well, onto the list, we can see a total of 5 points that YouTube goes on to determine the advertiser-friendly quality of the video. But it might be more than 5 in reality, as before the list begins, it's directly stated that content that is considered not advertiser-friendly includes but is not limited to these 5 points, excellently pointing out that YouTube may determine anything to be inappropriate, not just these named ones, allowing for vague and absolute power over content monetization.
Yep, and the way these are set up means that if they want to shut down your advertisements, you can't appeal and say, but I didn't break any of these rules, because they don't even have to make a rule for you to have potentially broken it.
A method used only by those with the noblest intentions, I'm sure of it. And with that out of the way, we can discuss the first violation to get your monetization privilege revoked: sexually suggestive content, including partial nudity and sexual humor. An example of partial nudity, of course, being something like this. As you can clearly see, a good amount of skin is shown on the arms and ankles, as well as their V-neck revealing even more. This clearly being an example of partial nudity, which YouTube would certainly not allow.
See, I would define partial nudity as having a nipple slip out, or showing a large amount of breasts, or something along those lines. But the problem with just saying partial nudity is that it is a completely subjective measure. A woman in a bikini can be partially nude to some people, or even just showing some ankle or wrists to others. This is the problem with these guidelines in general. They're all very vague, and very hard to narrow down to a list of do's or don'ts because of it.
Yes, it would be difficult for anyone or any group truly to determine what is and is not sexually suggestive, despite the seemingly straightforward nature of the topic. For example, historical art would consistently have full nudity in their paintings and statues. One could easily interpret this as nothing more than nakedness for the sake of nakedness, while others may consider them to be nothing less than high art worthy of attention and praise. Though I'm sure that YouTube in its perfect track record will most certainly only strike videos which clearly break this very well-defined rule.
And then we have the next one. Violence, including display of serious injury, and events related to violent extremism. On the face of it, that seems alright, and I get the feeling this is written to give them an excuse to not fund ISIS accounts, although they could just ban ISIS accounts or break numerous laws. But again, the wording just doesn't quite add up to that. For one thing, it doesn't say that you can't promote violence, it says that you can't show it. Does this include things like a fight scene from a movie? And then a serious injury could be applied to anything. A paper cut can potentially be fatal if it gets infected. And then the one that would actually make sense is still too vague. I can't show violent extremism or events related to it, so I couldn't make a Holocaust documentary because according to this, if you don't even display the violent extremism, it's still invalid to monetize the video. What about a documentary about 9/11? I can't talk about that either because it relates to violent extremism. There are legitimate news channels out there on YouTube, the Young Turks not being one of them, who need to be able to not only talk about violent extremism, but at their own discretion be able to show violent extremism in action. I know YouTube likes to write the rules in plain everyday English so that you don't need a lawyer present to understand, but these guidelines actually do need to be explained in detail somewhere so that we can actually figure out what the real-world impact of these guidelines will be.
But Joe, clearly what they mean by display of violent extremism is any intended violence similar to the following clip. Now, those weak of heart may wish to turn away, as what you are about to witness may be considered shocking, appalling even. It may very well scar you for life. Now, viewer discretion is highly advised. See, Joe, isn't that absolutely horrifying? Clearly no advertisement company would ever wish to associate themselves with such heinous acts of intentional harm. I mean, really, it's as harmful as swearing or using vulgar speech. Absolutely horrible. Which is exactly why it's YouTube's next point to disable monetization for anyone who uses such heinous language, as you can see here.
Yep, those fuckers at YouTube think that just because you say fuck or ass once in a while that no one on earth would want to advertise with you. And hell, vulgar language isn't even necessarily cussing. By definition, vulgar language is really just unrefined or lacking sophistication. Are we going to disable advertising on Black Lives Matter videos that use a lot of Ebonics instead of standard American English? Or is American English too vulgar for you? So we have to start speaking Oxford English. Can we say the word fag because it's still in common usage as a cigarette in the UK? Or can Brits not use it because it's offensive in America? These are the kinds of details we need from YouTube.
Again, we come back to the fact that YouTube's policy list has all the information of a summarized Twitter post, but I believe something else deserves more attention than the fact that it's so delightfully vague and easy to misinterpret. This single sentence essentially is stating that such wildly popular YouTube channels, such as JonTron, Nostalgia Critic, The Angry Video Game Nerd, Markiplier, PewDiePie, Jacksepticeye, in fact, most Let's Players, let's be honest here, all of them and countless more are deemed to be too vulgar for advertisers. Some of the greatest and most admirable entertainers of our time and past times are now all considered to be non-advertiser friendly based on the fact that a portion of their humor contains foul language. Not by the advertisers themselves, let us remind you, but by YouTube.
Yep, with the guidelines they have in place right now, and if they are enforced fully, YouTube will die. But moving along, we have the only rule that I'm actually sort of okay with. You aren't allowed to promote drugs or related substances, including the sale, use, and abuse of such items. That's fine by me. Most drugs are illegal over a majority of the planet, so promoting crimes, well, I'm not surprised they don't want to deal with that on their platform. That works out well enough for me.
While I mostly agree, the rule does not specifically state what type of drugs they are referring to. Yes, lesser stuff such as caffeine probably isn't going to raise any alarms. There is still room for question with such substances as alcohol or pain medication, however. While not illegal, they are still toxic to the body if not properly maintained. If someone on camera were to ingest either of these, would that be subject to demonetization? Well, YouTube was kind enough to answer this in a very concise paragraph right here.
Yeah, it's a bit like controversial or sensitive subjects and events, including subjects related to war, political conflicts, natural disasters, and tragedies, even if graphic imagery is not shown. So again, we don't even need to see something graphic for it to be unmonetizable, because it is too controversial. Hell, every video I make is controversial. All I do is talk about feminism, Black Lives Matter, and social justice in general. Once in a while I'll go after a flat earther. But I'm guessing that YouTube will be considering that too controversial too. And what about sensitive subjects and events? What counts as sensitive? Can Hillary Clinton not make a video about her sensitive emails? We can't talk about wars. Fucking wars. If the US invades fucking Russia tomorrow, I'm not allowed to bring that up. And then politics. How the hell is our republic supposed to work if we aren't allowed to use a public platform to fucking talk about politics? Somehow this list is in order from the least to most ridiculous because I can't talk about fucking natural disasters either. Legitimately, if a fucking hurricane were to hit Florida without showing any images of the dead or the flooding, it may be considered too controversial or sensitive to monetize. And then we have tragedies. So I can't talk about Romeo and Juliet now. Pretty much all of ancient Greek literature is off the table. Fucking hell, YouTube, get your shit together.
At this point, I would put my own 2 cents in what I think of this. However, I believe Joe has already stated everything I had to say on the matter. In summary, we should not be disallowed from speaking of tragedies, natural occurrences, and otherwise significant current or historical events. Also, as a side note, I find it a tad ironic that they are attempting to censor controversy by instating an incredibly controversial solution, such as this. With that said, I think it's only proper we discuss the very end of this list. More specifically, them stating that if any portion of the video contains any of the above, it may be disqualified for monetizing. Necessarily stating that even in an otherwise unrelated video, it may be considered non-advertiser friendly if it contains even a fragment of what might be controversial. Such as showing a paper cut, telling a dirty joke, wishing well for the survivors of a natural disaster, letting out a swear word, or drinking a sip of alcohol. The usual stuff when you think of controversy.
Yep, the bit at the end of the guidelines is just as terrifying as the actual guidelines. They can take down monetization in stages, which is good because at least it means that it's not entirely all or nothing. But the biggest problem with this is that if you make enough videos that violate their policy, they can disable your ability to monetize anything anywhere on your channel. But the biggest thing on this entire page is the blatant hypocrisy. After everything we just told you, we see this little bit here under. Best practices for advertiser-friendly content. Remember, context is key. We understand that high-quality content isn't always sanitized. Oh, fucking really, YouTube. Especially when it comes to real-world issues. If your video has graphic material in it, you can help make it advertiser-friendly by providing context. Oh, really, YouTube? We don't have to sanitize our videos on subjects that you just said we were not allowed to talk about at all? We can't talk about politics, but if we were to somehow get around that rule, then we are allowed to do so in a certain way. Fuck off, YouTube. The policy needs to be rewritten. Hell, this whole page needs to be rewritten, because it is full of glaring contradictions, vague language, and honestly Orwellian ideas to begin with.
In summary, I believe this to be a brilliant rework of the YouTube policies and guidelines that— oh, who am I kidding? This is complete and total trash that needs to be deleted and forgotten about as soon as possible. Even if each point was made crystal clear, the ideas themselves are in favor of total censorship and promote what is trying to be purely a place where the real world doesn't exist. People get hurt, people swear, people drink, that's just what they do, and yet YouTube, a platform that's entire existence thus far has been devoted to the notion that you can upload your full expressions without any fear of repercussions, has now decided that no more shall we speak freely in how we truly feel, no more shall we display the tragedies that unfold in our world, no more shall we laugh amongst ourselves as we make dirty humor. We must all conform to these supposed feel-good policies which exist only to make overly sensitive people feel more secure, and even this is bound to fail as they are bound to be threatened by something or another, no matter what. It's just how things go, it's how things are, and yes, both Joe and I know that this isn't true censorship, as they're not deleting or hiding anything, rather they're demonetizing it, which in a way is just as bad, perhaps worse.
Yes, and YouTube is not actually censoring anything. And to be perfectly fair, I believe that YouTube, as a private company, has the right to censor or demonetize us if they want to. But I, as a hardcore capitalist, also believe it is the job of the consumer to tell a corporation when they are making a bad choice. And so, if they're going to abuse this, we need to take away their source of money. And that source of money is us. I'll be making another video over on my channel if you want to hear how I plan to do that. But otherwise, I will let Eric have the last word.
It's a slippery slope to slide down in terms of actual censorship. Slowly introducing something can result in a negative impact that will be received imperceptibly over time. This may not seem that dramatic at first glance, but that kind of makes it even worse. Even if they aren't actually removing anything directly, taking away the option to profit off of your own thoughts is in the same boat as flat out telling the content creators that they either conform to their new ideals or lose revenue opposing them. This can easily be misused as a way of silently killing off the livelihood of YouTubers who are informative, entertaining, or both, simply on the basis that they may have technically broke one of these new rules that are cryptic and hardly make sense. And this is not something I can watch idly without voicing my protest.